The supply sergeant at Fort Bragg looked up from his paperwork when Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez walked into the equipment room. His eyes immediately dropped to her boots. He'd heard about them. Everyone on base had. But seeing them in person was something else entirely. Worn leather, so scuffed the original black had faded to a mottled gray. Laces frayed and knotted in 3 places where they'd broken and been tied back together. The soles were cracked, separating from the uppers in spots, the tread worn smooth. They looked like relics from another era. Which, in a way, they were. Staff Sergeant David Chen said, setting down his pen and standing. Those boots are, well, they are beyond serviceable. I can issue you new ones right now. Standard procedure for senior NCOs. Takes 5 minutes. Elena looked down at her boots. She'd heard this speech before. At Fort Benning. At Fort Campbell. At Bagram Airfield. Always the same concern. Always the same offer. These boots are fine, she said quietly. Chen shook his head. With all due respect, they are not. They're a safety hazard. The soles are splitting. The leather is compromised. If you slip during PT, or on a deployment. I said they are fine, Sergeant. Her voice was calm but absolute. Chen recognized that tone. You didn't argue with it. Not if you were smart. But as Elena turned to leave, curiosity got the better of him. I have to ask. Why those boots? What makes them so special that you won't replace them? Elena stopped at the door. Her hand rested on the frame. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, without turning around, she said, They've been with me a long time, Sergeant. That's enough. She walked out, leaving Chen staring after her, confused and more curious than ever. He didn't know it yet, but in 3 days, during a mandatory retirement formation, he would get his answer. And he would never forget it. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez was 61 years old, one of the oldest active duty soldiers at Fort Bragg. She'd enlisted in 1995, when women were still barred from most combat roles, when being female in the military meant proving yourself twice as hard for half the recognition. She'd served 28 years. 7 deployments. 4 war zones. She'd been in Somalia during the tail end of operations there. Afghanistan in the early years. Iraq during the surge. Back to Afghanistan for the long grind. She'd done it all as support, as logistics, as intelligence, never officially in combat, but always close enough to hear the gunfire, close enough to patch the wounded, close enough to carry the weight. And through it all, she'd worn the same boots. They were standard issue, purchased in 1995 at her first duty station. She'd resold them 4 times. Repaired the leather by hand. Replaced the laces a dozen times. They'd been with her longer than any relationship, any posting, any version of herself she'd grown into and out of. The other soldiers didn't understand. How could they? Most of them were in their 20s, on their first enlistment, their boots still shiny and new. They looked at Elena and saw an old woman clinging to the past. They didn't see the history those boots carried. The contrast was stark. The young soldiers wore the latest gear, boots with advanced traction, moisture-wicking materials, ergonomic designs. Everything new, everything optimized. Elena's boots looked like museum pieces by comparison. And the comments came. Not always to her face, but loud enough for her to hear. Does she not know the Army issues new boots? Maybe she's saving money for retirement. How is she even allowed to wear those? Elena heard them all. She just didn't respond. Because the truth was too complicated, too personal, too heavy to explain in a hallway or a mess line. 3 days before her retirement, Private First Class Jake Morrison made a mistake. He was 19, fresh from basic training, assigned to the battalion headquarters company. He'd been at Fort Bragg for exactly 6 weeks and thought he understood how the Army worked. That morning, during PT formation, he saw Elena running with the group. Her pace was slower than the younger soldiers. Age and 3 knee surgeries had taken their toll, but she kept up. What caught Morrison's attention were her boots. "Yo," he whispered to the private beside him. "Look at the Sergeant Major's boots. They're falling apart." His buddy snorted. "Dude, those things are ancient. Why doesn't she just get new ones?" "Maybe she doesn't know how," Morrison joked. Should we tell her about the supply room? The laughter was quiet but audible. A few other soldiers glanced over. Elena kept running, eyes forward. After the run, Morrison couldn't let it go. In the barracks, he told the story to his squad. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but seriously, someone should say something. It's unprofessional. Word spread. By lunch, half the company was talking about the sergeant major's boots. Some defended her. Most just shook their heads. A few made jokes. That afternoon, Morrison was assigned to help staff Sergeant Chen in the supply room. He was organizing inventory when Elena walked in. Morrison watched the entire exchange. He heard Chen offer new boots. He heard Elena refuse. And after she left, he couldn't help himself. Sarge, why didn't you just make her take new boots? You're authorized to, right? Chen looked at him. Private, you don't make a sergeant major do anything. But those boots are a safety issue. You said so yourself. I know what I said. So why? Because there's something about those boots I don't understand yet, Chen interrupted. And until I do, I'm not pushing it. Morrison frowned. What's there to understand? They're just boots. Chen shook his head. Nothing in this army is just anything, Private. You'll learn that eventually. 2 days later, a memo went out. Mandatory formation, Sergeant Major Vasquez retirement ceremony, 1,400 hours, full battalion attendance, dress uniforms. Morrison showed up in his Class A uniform, boots polished to a mirror shine, feeling like this was a formality. Another retirement. Another speech. Another afternoon standing in formation. But when Elena walked to the front, he noticed immediately. She was wearing those boots. The worn, cracked, falling apart boots. Even for her own retirement ceremony. Is she serious? Morrison whispered to the soldier beside him. The formation commander called everyone to attention. Elena stood at the podium, flanked by the battalion commander and the command sergeant major. Behind her was a table with a folded flag, a retirement certificate, and a shadow box containing her medals and rank insignia. But Elena ignored all of it. She looked out at the formation, 200 soldiers in pristine uniforms, all staring at her, and began to speak. I've been in the army for 28 years, she said, her voice steady and clear. Most of you weren't born when I enlisted. And for the last few weeks, I've heard the comments. About my boots. The formation went very still. Morrison felt his stomach drop. So before I leave, Elena continued, I'm going to tell you about these boots. Because some of you need to understand that respect isn't about appearance. It's about what you've carried. She reached down and began unlacing her right boot. The silence was absolute. She pulled the boot off and held it up for everyone to see. Then she turned it over, revealing the insole. Pressed into the worn fabric was dark soil. Not the red clay of Fort Bragg. Something else. Something that didn't belong. Mogadishu, Somalia. December 1993, Elena said. I was 29 years old. Women weren't allowed in combat roles, but I was assigned to a support unit providing logistics to the Rangers. When the Black Hawks went down, when the city turned into a battle zone, no one cared about regulations anymore. They cared about getting people out alive. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I was. And when our convoy came under fire, when soldiers were bleeding and dying, I did what I had to do. I carried ammunition. I treated wounds. I dragged a wounded ranger into cover while rounds were snapping past my head. Elena looked down at the boot in her hand. After it was over, after we made it back, I stepped outside the compound. And I knelt down. And I took a handful of soil from that place. Because I'd survived something I wasn't supposed to survive. And I made myself a promise. I'd keep this soil in my boot as a reminder. As proof that I belonged. She set the first boot down and unlaced the second. She turned it over, revealing more soil. Different color. Lighter, more sand than dirt. Kandahar, Afghanistan. 2003, she said. Early days of the war. I was logistics again. Convoy security. We hit an IED outside the city. 3 vehicles destroyed. 5 soldiers killed. I pulled 2 men from a burning truck. Got them stabilized before the medevac arrived. Both of them lived. Her voice didn't waver, but her eyes were bright. After the ceremony where they gave me a commendation, I walked to the spot where that IED went off. And I took soil from that place. Because those two men, Private Chen and Corporal Davidson, went home to their families. And I wanted to remember what that cost. Morrison's heart was pounding. Staff Sergeant Chen, the supply sergeant. That was him? Elena reached for her left boot. Baghdad, Iraq. 2007, surge operations. I ran supply lines through some of the most dangerous roads in the country. Lost friends. Saw things I'll never forget. But I kept going. Because someone had to. She turned the boot over. More soil. Reddish brown, almost clay-like. This is from Route Irish. The most dangerous road in Iraq. I drove it 47 times. Every time, I came back. Not everyone did. Finally, she held up her right boot again. Helmand Province, Afghanistan. 2012, my last deployment. I was 53 years old. Too old to be there, according to some. But I went anyway. Because the mission wasn't done. Because younger soldiers still needed support. Because I'd made a promise to myself a long time ago, I wouldn't quit until the fight was over. She looked directly at Morrison. At Chen. At all the young soldiers who'd laughed. These boots have carried me through 4 war zones. 15 years of deployments. They've walked through blood and fire and loss. They've stood on soil where Americans died defending each other. And yes, they're old. Yes, they're worn out. Yes, they don't meet your standard of professional appearance. Her voice hardened. But they've earned every crack, every fray, every worn spot. And I'll be damned if I replace them just because someone thinks they look bad. The formation was silent. Not a single soldier moved. Elena set the boots down on the table beside her retirement certificate. Tomorrow, these boots are going into the Fort Bragg Museum. They'll be displayed with the soil still inside, along with the story of what they represent. So the next generation of soldiers can see them and understand something important. She looked out at the battalion. Respect isn't about looking perfect. It's about what you've endured. What you've carried. What you've sacrificed when no one was watching. Elena stepped back from the podium. The battalion commander stepped forward to present her retirement certificate and flag, but before he could speak, something unexpected happened. Staff Sergeant Chen broke from his position in formation. He walked forward, came to attention in front of Elena, and saluted. His eyes were wet. He said, his voice thick with emotion. Private Chen, Baghdad, 2007. You pulled me out of that truck. I never knew your name. They told me it was a sergeant from logistics. I've been looking for you for 16 years. Elena stared at him. Recognition dawned slowly. David? Yes? You saved my life. And I just tried to make you throw away the boots you were wearing when you did it. Elena's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her face. She reached out and pulled Chen into a hug. The formation watched, stunned and silent. Then, one by one, other soldiers stepped forward. A captain. Kandahar, 2003. You stabilized my leg after the IED. Doctors said another 5 minutes and I'd have lost it. A master sergeant. Helmand, 2012. You ran supplies to my platoon when we were pinned down for 3 days. We wouldn't have made it without you. 7 soldiers in total. 7 lives she'd saved or changed. 7 people who'd been searching for the logistics sergeant who'd been there when it mattered. Morrison stood frozen, shame burning through him. He'd mocked this woman. Laughed at her boots. Never once considered that those worn, ugly boots had walked through hell to bring people home. After the formation was dismissed, Morrison approached Elena. He didn't know what to say. But she looked at him and smiled gently. Private Morrison, she said. You're young. You made a mistake. Learn from it. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You didn't know because I didn't tell you, Elena interrupted. That's not your fault. But now you do know. So what are you going to do differently? Morrison swallowed hard. Never judge someone without knowing their story. Good start, Elena said. Now let me give you some advice. Every soldier you meet, every person you meet, is carrying something you can't see. Scars, memories, battles fought in silence. Respect them. Not because of their rank or their appearance, but because they're human, and they're doing their best. She picked up her boots from the table, cradling them like precious artifacts. These boots taught me that. I hope they teach you too. 3 months later, the boots were displayed in the Fort Bragg Museum. Mounted in a glass case, the soil still visible in the insoles. Beside them, a plaque. Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez, U.S. Army, 1995 to 2023. These boots carried her through 4 war zones over 15 years. The soil inside represents Mogadishu, 1993, Kandahar, 2003, Baghdad, 2007, and Helmand Province, 2012. They are a testament to endurance, sacrifice, and the truth that respect is earned not through appearance, but through service. Beneath the plaque, a smaller inscription: never judge a warrior by their boots. Judge them by the ground they've covered. Private Morrison visited that display every week. He'd stand there, looking at those worn, cracked boots, and remember the lesson they taught him. Respect isn't about perfection. It's about perseverance. It's about showing up, day after day, year after year, even when no one sees. Even when no one understands. Even when people laugh. True warriors don't need shiny boots. They just need boots that refuse to quit. Moral of the story: never judge someone by their appearance. Every person carries a history you cannot see, and respect should be given not for how someone looks, but for what they've endured. The most worn paths often belong to the strongest travelers. If this story moved you, don't forget to show your support. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. We bring you true tales of courage, sacrifice, and honor. Stories that remind us that heroism isn't always visible on the surface. Sometimes it's hidden in the worn leather of old boots that refuse to quit. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never forget the heroes among us.